On the goal line.
So will there be time? That's what the Aussies are looking for clarification around.
On the goal line.
The clock starts from when you nominate, not from when the penalty was given.
A restart.
Oh, you heard it there. Okay, so there will be a restart.
Yeah, sorry. When they take...
Donaldson. After the full-time siren.
Is that time?
Waiting, and winning if you're an Aussie! Finally, they jag one in the Rugby Championship.
Ben Donaldson, the hero, and the Wallabies have snapped an 8-match losing streak in the Rugby Championship with a thrilling victory over Los Pumas in La Plata. What a victory, and it's a win that probably shocked a lot of people off the back of the Aussies falling behind early 10-0, but they managed to work their way back. Ben Donaldson, the hero. I'm Christy, Doran, and joining me on this rapid-fire edition of the Raw Rugby podcast is Tony Harper. Harps, what a win.
Yeah, exactly. And you talk about them going out to a 10-point lead. More significant, perhaps, was Noah Loliseo missing his kick just before halftime, and then Argentina coming out after the break and going to a 9-point lead there. And at that point, that's when I started to think it was running away. But in the end, Christy, there was silverware. We might be bottom of the the Rugby Championship table, but we got to lift a trophy there. So that was excellent. Joe was happy in the rain, dancing in the rain at the end. Look, it was great. It's a beautiful, beautiful Sunday morning here where we're sitting. So contrast to the last couple of Saturday nights that we've had to sit there and do this instant reaction pod. I've got all these endorphins running after that one. What about you?
I'll tell you what, the endorphins will be running high over in South America too as well, because Joe Schmidt, we jumped on a Zoom straight away after, spoke to Joe for 10, 15 minutes or so, and even he was saying he was going to have a couple of beers tonight and maybe some wine tomorrow. It's that sort of feeling for it. They have played and battered themselves through the rain, but they've come out on top, and they should reward themselves tomorrow. We'll talk about some of the players later on because there were several that put their hands up, but I asked Joe about what can this do for a young side, and I asked Harry Wilson as well, sitting beside him, captain. Who would have believed it that he would have been captain at the start of the year? But the two of them were pretty quick just to temper what it means, weren't they? They're not saying that they've turned the corner, but they hope that it's a momentum builder, and it should be. To go away from home, the first two are under Joe Schmidt. Super performance to fight their way through that fair bit of adversity to come away with a win.
I think one thing is the win, and another thing is we're seeing a bit of development in the style. There was, stories this week about and criticism of Joe Schmidt's Wallabies as playing too narrow, and Tate McDermott raising this week how it was unlike what they were playing at Super Rugby, to which Joe kind of bristled when he was confronted with those kind of comments. But we saw, we've seen earlier in this season them kicking early and kicking straight away in a game, and we really opened the match with a 27-phase, performance there, which I think, as Sean Maloney said, he couldn't remember the last time Australia put together 27 phases, which kind of nodded at something different. And then early in the second half, I think after they went the 9 points down, we started to see them going wide as well. So we started bringing wingers into play that hadn't been brought in the earlier half too. So, like, as much as the 1 point victory means the world to those guys at the moment as well, encouragingly, I think for fans, is we're starting to see something a bit more, aren't we?
Yeah, that's a really good point, because even if you isolate those 27 phases, they lost about 15 metres in attack. So they were minus 15. And it did show that there's teething issues when it comes to the attack and the fluency, the continuity, the ball handling, the attention to detail at the ruck was pretty good, but they were getting battered by an Argentinian side that's got a really renowned back row, guys like Matera, Crema, Gonzalez in the back row, about as physical as you'll get in world rugby, and they couldn't make any meters. But you're right, towards the end of the first half, a great try from Jake Gordon, and they managed to get some soft shoulders and then offload a couple of times. And Lenny Cattell was at the heart of that. He was superb today, Sunday time. But Saturday evening in Argentina. And he was at the heart of their first try to Gordon, but he was also at the heart of their second try. And it came off momentum, getting some gain line dominance. Alan Alatoa made a good impact, managing to get over. And then Ikatea shrugged off two Argentinian defenders, released his arms. Marika Korobetti got well over the gain line. And then 2-3 phases later, we see Rob Valentini cross and Angus Bell jumping into halfback there. And, he's the world's biggest halfback, but it was really smart of Bell to understand that really quick ruck speed's important there, and you're not going to stop Valentini one-on-one. So you're right to point out the progress, because there were some small stepping stones this afternoon around how Joe Schmidt's sides play, both sides of the ruck and continuity. And we saw it a lot with Ireland, where they would have 20, 30 phases regularly. We still see that, and we saw that today.
There were a couple of moments, obviously, that, there were poor execution, which he spoke about as well, which you need to keep on top of, those failed kick receipts, which I think it was
four of them.
Four in total, exactly. And then there was a moment where in that second half where Australia had a scrum, 5-metre scrum out, and Jake Gordon peeled off to the left down the blind side and appeared to call Harry Wilson down there, and he got bundled into touch. Like moments like that where you did think, this is, this ill discipline is going to be, a coach killer for Joe up in the box. But they found a way, and like going way back to that 27 phases, that began a softening up period, I guess. And the back row were fabulous. I think Morgan Turanui talking about how every one of Rob Valentini's meters are post-contact, that he's just a battering ram there, and he stood up yet again. And they all combined brilliantly back there. We haven't even got on to Carlo Tizzano yet, who was my man of the match.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about some of the players in a moment that really stood up, because there was, I think, about half a dozen that were superb. One of the key moments of the game, and it looks like sinking the Wallabies, was around that 66th minute, when a bit of loose ball, a little bit of kick tennis, but then Lolasio decides not to kick the ball, to take it on. And it was almost deer in the headlights stuff, where he ends up passing to Carlo Tizzano, who gets hammered in attack. He was a sitting duck there, but then a couple of seconds later, with the Wallabies really retreating, a really poor left to right pass to Nick Frost, who shelled it on the ground. And the Wallabies really probably came out of breathing a sigh of relief that they didn't concede 7 because of a Harry Wilson great last-ditched effort on his try line to prevent the loose head prop. But they ended up taking 3 to go in front. So I know we spoke to Schmidt about Lolasio. Sum up what he said around how he thought his performance was.
He said he likes to see him being brave, and he did point out that moment where he threw that very loose pass in front of Nick Frost, as he'd probably preferred to see him going downtown there. But he also, I think he made the point yet again that this is about continuity in the number 10 jersey, and that he needs to be allowed to do that he's not. And what we're seeing is that Noah is he's not retreating into a shell based on making some mistakes, is he? He's playing it out to the finish. I mean, he played 75 minutes there, got them, to that point. There were obviously some issues there. Obviously, yet again, he is a bit of a rocks and diamonds player, isn't he? But Joe's happy enough with the flashes of diamond coming through at the moment. You're right, though. That was a massive moment for mine when Jake Gordon, I think, slowed Thomas Gallo down at first, and then Wilson's come in and got that ball clear. That's a try all day. And I think at that point, if they score there with that crowd and those conditions, and the Wallabies, the Wallabies do have a habit of losing close ones over the last few seasons, that it's hard to see them coming back from there. So that leadership, I guess, from Wilson, he's now a lucky skipper as well. We've had so many, how many times has Alan stood up there and had to talk about 1 or 2 point losses, and Harry is first as the 90th skipper, 100% record.
Yeah, so we at the Raw broke the news that Harry Wilson was going to be skipper during the week, and it wasn't quite George Gregan on Jeff Wilson in the Bledisloe a few decades ago, but it was a moment that sums up Harry Wilson, that he's just all heart, and we saw that in both sides of the ball. He was regularly carrying it, got over the gain line often. He made 15 tackles in defence, and none was bigger than that moment there. So you tip your hat to him. I found it actually interesting that it looks like Harry Wilson was still captain when Alan Alatoa came on. Even though Alatoa spoke to James Dolman once or twice, Wilson decided, we'll point to the post on this occasion. So that's fascinating. And I just wonder, tours getting away, new leadership, you're trying to get rid of bury the sins of the past. I think if the Wallabies were to somehow produce another victory on Argentinian soil, Joe Schmidt will be thinking long and hard about, is Harry Wilson actually the guy to lead us forward? Because he is just that follow me leader, which is quite refreshing.
Do you think Joe Schmidt really cares that much about who is the captain week to week? Do you think he's actually in searching for a long-term leader, or do you think he's quite happy to bounce from player to player?
It's funny you ask that, because every time that Joe Schmidt's been asked about the captaincy, he's brushed it off. You know what? Like, there'll be a bunch of them this year. I've got to get to know the players, this and that. I don't know if I buy it, because if you think about where he's been, the All Blacks have always had a big leader. And during the World Cup last year, it was important to have that continuity and leadership. But particularly when he was in Ireland, guys like Paul O'Connell, Rory Best, and then Johnny Sexton, there was three clear-cut and out-and-out leaders. And I think that in his heart, he'll know that it's important to have a leader. And there's something about Harry Wilson. We've seen it in the past against the Chiefs last year, a great moment for Queensland, where he was right at the forefront of their success. But even against the Crusaders in Christchurch, sapping a couple of decade long drought in Christchurch, it was Harry Wilson that did the charge down, that scored the try. And it was those sorts of moments where I think his teammates rally and get behind him. And that's maybe why they pointed to him as the person that should lead the Wallabies this week. Okay, let's turn to some other players that really stood up. You reckon Carlo Tizzano was your man of the match? Oh, he'd be right up there for me. I'll say mine in a moment. But Tizzano,
I love the energy he brought. There's obviously that story that's been super well told about him going to the Waratahs to take Michael Hooper's jersey off him. That didn't go down that well with fans or Michael Hooper, if you believe Carlo. He'd gone back to the Western Force. He kind of, I just had a look, and he's 2 centimetres, I think, shorter than Hoops, and a couple of kilos shy of, at least what the record show Hoops as. I'm not saying that he's going to be in that league going forward, but to me, it was a Hoops style performance. He was everywhere. He was relentless. There was that moment, I think it was the 53rd minute, where we've come down out of a line out and he's won a penalty. He's confronted by 3. There's a guy, the Stan Sport did a feature on him before the game about his MMA and his wrestling and his interest in that. To me, it was like WWF or WWE, whatever it is now, when, it's one guy against 3 in the ring, and it's all, but this wasn't a setup. He was there winning that penalty. Massive moment, lifted the whole team. He's a guy you can really get behind as well. Like, that's a great story of Joe's new Wallabies, like not the same old story, someone fresh coming in and really lighting it up, just with pure desire. There's so much desire in this bloke.
The punters out there won't believe your positivity today, Harps, and it's amazing what a victory will do. But you are right to point out that, because I counted 3 turnovers, but in addition to the 3 turnovers, it's 22 tackles. And you're right, he was everywhere. He actually carried the ball better than he has in recent weeks as well. His 3rd Test match. Look, I think Fraser McWright comes back into this side, but there is no doubt that Tizzano has shown that he's the confrontational sort of player, that no frills guy, the ruggedness behind him that in a game of war of attrition, he's actually very effective. He can withstand the blows at the breakdown. So that's really crucial because it took Fraser years and years to get to that point in time. They're similar ages, obviously, but Tizano at 24 is the sort of right age profile to really be coming through. So, yeah, he was superb. To me, Lenny Katau, I think he was my player of the match because even though he didn't score a try, the 2 tries came off him and what he could do at the line and through footwork and his ability to release and offload. He was superb.
There was a beautiful no-look pass inside that led to that try in the first half, wasn't it? Where he found Tom Wright, who went to ground and did really well himself to scoop that ball up there to Jake Gordon, who was running on the inside support. That was you're right there, and Ikitau was excellent. Again, there were. I mean, I think there were other issues in the back line, but he definitely stood up. I'd be keen to hear how you thought Hamish Stewart went on his debut as well. He gave a great post-match interview worth listening to as well. But how do you feel he kind of fared there?
He's a bit of a knockabout guy, isn't he? He's from Toowoomba, 26. Yeah. He's seen a lot. He's played, I think about 110 Super Rugby matches. I was really impressed. It was unfortunate that he let himself down with one knock-on when under not a huge amount of pressure and the ball just went to ground. But you can understand that in the wet, greasy conditions. But I thought it was a pretty seamless progression to the test arena, and that'll really please Joe Schmidt. I have no doubt he'll start next week. He did what he always does defensively. He made 11 tackles. Didn't look like he was overpowered. We didn't see a huge amount of kicking game, but I thought the fact that it's his first ever match, obviously, but his first time that he's gone up alongside Noah Lolosio as well. He's never had Lenny Katau outside him. So, yeah, you'll want to see more progression from an attack fluency perspective. We barely saw Andrew Kellaway, but that's going to happen on a wet evening, right?
Yeah, well, also, is that just the wet evening, or is Joe Schmidt not a wingers coach? Because the ball doesn't seem to be heading out there much. I mean, obviously Noah had a chance to put Max Jorgensen across or significantly downfield late in the game, but the pass couldn't be held. Didn't see a lot of Marika either today, I didn't think. And what we did see wasn't great. He dropped a kickoff. He took a player out in the air. Doesn't seem great value for our one overseas star recruit for mine. Not to bang that drum again on a day where we've won, but yeah, I mean, do you think Joe as a wingers, is he bringing the best out in them, or with the style that he's going with?
I think it's going to be very difficult when you're in Brisbane and you get absolutely overpowered in every aspect of the game, and then you have 2 wet nights like we've seen in Perth and in Buenos Aires. I don't think you can read too much into it. Argentina's wingers barely touched the ball as well. There was a lot of box kicking, contestable kicking, which I thought was okay. Just more often than not, they didn't get the ball. So, Marika gave away a couple of clumsy penalties, especially one by tackling the man in the air. But look, I wouldn't read too much into that. I think it was a game one up front, and that back row alongside Wilson and Tizano, Valentini was superb. Bell played 65 minutes or so with Isaac Kalia having a head knock. I think you'll see James Slipper come back next week. It was good to see Taniela Tupou get through, 45 minutes or so. He didn't get the front foot ball or that ability to run onto it to really penetrate the line, but the fact that he didn't get up like he did in the Rebels right the way throughout the Super Rugby season, where he was always on the ground and whinging and moaning about some form of niggle, that's a pleasing thing. He
also won the first scrum penalty of the game, 3rd minute, with his power there too. So obviously, lots made of Argentina's scrum prowess, but he came out there with a heavy blow early on, which was a good scene setter.
It's true. I know Tim Horan made mention of Argentina's set piece prowess. They're certainly not the scrum dominant side that they once upon a time were. So I'm not surprised that they had a bit of dominance at the scrum. They definitely shaved the Argentinians there, even though there was one penalty that went against Bell that really easily could have gone against them, with Taniela winning the other side of it. So anyway, I think all in all, a really positive step forward to win by a point on foreign soil, to get on the scoreboard from a rugby championship point of view. That's hugely significant, given that there's 2 clashes against the All Blacks to follow next week's test. I think that's an okay segue. We're not going to talk much about the ABs and the Springboks, because we'll talk about that later on with Matt Tumua. But a 31-27 victory for the Springboks. South Africa scored 2 tries in the last 12 minutes. Quagga Smith, Grant Williams, replacement halfback, scoring to break New Zealand's hearts after they really dominated a fair bit of possession and territory, and the scoreline clearly a controversial moment early doors, though. Think about the 15th, 16th minute with Bongi and Bamabi being awarded a try despite very much looking like he'd lost possession there. But that's a great win, 3 from 3 box halves, and that one, Ellis Park, they'll go to Cape Town next week.
Yeah, Sia Khaleesi speaking afterwards about how, whenever we're behind, we never panic. We've been in far worse positions before, and talking about the cool heads within the team. And they just have that world champion glow, don't they, that they expect to win. They can get the job done like that. But it's the first time that they've beaten New Zealand in 3 straight matches in 15 years. They haven't won 4 straight since 1949. So all eyes on that one next week, eh?
Oh, it's going to be a cracker. Well, Hubs, I reckon that's short and sharp. That is a rapid-fire edition. Thanks for your time on this Father's Day. We won't talk too much about that, but we're looking forward to our next podcast, because we've got a very special guest joining, and so please be attuned to that. Until then, enjoy the rest of your Sunday, Tony.
Thanks. I'll be sure to check that out.
All right. That's about it. Thanks for joining us in the Raw Rugby Podcast.